January 24th, Public Works Committee meeting.
Roll call?
Yes, roll call, please. 5A, amend Chapter 15.28, street trees to identify responsibility for trees planted in the right-of-way. You have 2 minutes.
But here's color trees. So what I'm proposing is that we amend the ordinance that it better defines when the city is responsible and when the city's not responsible.
I didn't really have any issues with the ordinance. I thought it made sense. We cover the cost of removal if we're putting a sidewalk in.
I would think so. If a tree was in the way of the sidewalk, in the past, we have just, because in any organization I've worked in, we just, take the responsibility, we remove it. I made notes that tree is now the obligation of the city.
Okay.
So, there was one lady over on, I think it was Spalding, a tree was failing, and it was replace it in October, and she goes, no, I don't want to wait. She goes, I don't mind. She goes, I just want to get it done. I said, all right. And I said, well, I'll put down that the city, I'm giving you authorization, and the city's taking responsibility for it. First, it was in between the sidewalk and the street. You get approval for it, then I have no problem documenting that we will be responsible going forward.
But eventually there'll be an actual process for it.
Yeah.
An actual.
Yeah.
So they don't have that existing already, then?
But there's no, I've looked high notation in there.
Yeah.
And so then it's better preserved for 20, 30 years
Well,
down the
no,
road.
that makes sense.
You know.
But I thought they already had that
Yeah.
written already.
As you might imagine, paper documents may have disappeared or. And when I looked at the GIS out here in the Cambridge area, there's people, they've put in landscape islands that encroach into the right-of-way, and it's like, well, we're not responsible for that. And if they happen to plant a tree in there, it gets down to what did they plant?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Other question?
One question. Now, the trees that are there, and,
Right.
okay.
Okay. Other question? Not call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Grass exists. We have a 6-inch maximum. The purpose of this became rather easy. I went to then basically went to reference some areas under the noxious weed, actually wooded areas like what exists on the west side of the city. I wouldn't expect anybody to go through all those trees and cut the grass there. Hilly, steep slope areas where it's not safe to run a tractor or a lawnmower, because you want the taller grasses to act as a buffer and also help filter the rainwater before it gets in there.
Now, is this for the city or is this for the homeowners?
It would apply to everyone, all land,
Okay.
all land.
I think, hold on, yes, so that then we mail a notice and then there's a time to rectify
Right.
versus we're not,
Right.
it's kind of worded in here, we're not going out hunting down tall grass just to
Yeah,
cite anyone.
right.
My only question is like just grass. Does it need to like be a little more specific as to what is allowed?
I know, I think I know what you're trying to
Or did I
describe here.
miss that in here?
No.
I think you've got it.
There's something about natural areas.
Anything else?
I think the idea would be, you have your no mow may, which is a rolling thing that the city does now, so that'd be kind of exempt from this. This would be kind of your natural lawn or your natural.
10, 17, 10.
Right.
Just under the exceptions here.
Right, so 5 will turn into 6, and I'll add a 5 in there for the natural areas.
Clarification. And I would think if you had any sort of raised garden bed that had plants of any.
Want to route them through that process in 1018.
Okay.
Will you get any feedback from the neighbors?
I would imagine with that process, I've never had to do.
Rough sketch of what, okay, I'm putting
Well, they should contact the neighbors.
Yeah, for sure that,
The
yeah.
residents should do that.
But just maybe name, just to the point of, okay, you're not just planting any random type of grasses, but maybe just name some of the, especially with it coming to council, just say, hey, we're gonna hear about it, and if you're,
They come to council meeting for public.
Having a plan as to, what's the plan and what's envisioned to be planted where and that kind of stuff, I think that would, my wife and I, we feed the wild birds, and what do? We kill the thistles in our yards, but yet we go and buy thistle
thistle
seed
seed, yeah.
to
yep.
feed the songbirds.
So, I mean, if you're gonna fence off an area or something, maybe you have some in there.
All right. Okay. If there is no more discussion, motion to approve could be considered.
I'll make a motion to approve that as corrected.
The amended chapter 1017. Okay, moved. Is there a second?
Go ahead.
Second.
Second, moved and seconded. Further discussion or question? Call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, item C, home serve, water and sewer lateral insurance.
That's yours.
That's mine. So it's not actually insurance, it's a warranty protection for homeowners. The premiums are $5.99 a month for external water line and $7.99 for external sewer line. And it covers up to 85 in sewer lines. What it does not cover is backups. I checked today to see if, like, for instance, we had the one backup that they went to the council about a month or so ago, and it would not cover damage done into that. It also covers the excavation, the landscaping, the fill, the road, if you have to dig up the road. So it's actually not a bad service. I've checked, and Beaver Dam actually has. They have over 301 customers with 589 plans, and they've had a total of $176,000 of approved claims since 2019. So that comes out to be about $1,200, about $1,285 per claim. But I will say, knowing how, especially sewer lines go, $1,200 is very low. So they've probably had some very low ones,
Yep.
with maybe televising or a backup, and then some very large ones, which, we could have,
Thousands.
yeah, we could talk about $5,000, $8,000 for a claim. So, because it can be very, very expensive to replace a sewer line lateral. So the only responsibility that Ripon would have, all of the mailings, everything is done through this program. We don't do anything. The only thing that we do is allow them to use our logo on their marketing material, and allow them to do the marketing 3 times a year. And the one thing that I would like to add is that we would forego, they do allow us a 10% royalty, but we would forego that. And in turn, that gives back the customer 50 cents per premium. So we don't necessarily need the royalties from it, and would rather have that go back to the customer, so.
So do they approve anybody's home, or do they go by a house and go, there's like 60 trees in this yard? Not doing
No, they do, from what I understand, they do approve any, there is zero, like, they don't inspect anything. It's just, you have a 30-day period where you can't claim anything, and then after that 30 days, then you can go up to $800.
So if you have a backup and you can stand the smell, 30 or okay.
We are not suggesting.
That a backup isn't covered though.
No, not the backup
No.
itself, but okay.
How much is that a month?
Well, for an external water line, it's $5.99 a month, so we would take 50 cents off of that. And then, external sewer line is $7.99. You are not obligated to take both, you could take either or.
And this is a voluntary opt.
This is a voluntary, and they'll do a mailing, they'll just send out, a little pamphlet, and it's up to the homeowner to give them a call back, and so they're under no obligations to take this whatsoever. It's just totally voluntary.
Hard to see a downside.
I guess I don't understand as to why, like, why is it coming to us? Like, why isn't this just something that people could do even if we don't approve it? You know what I'm saying?
Well, we've
Because
been
it's
talking
voluntary.
about this, we wanted some backing because we didn't want to just mail out and look like we're trying to sell something to the public,
Okay.
right? People have homeowners insurance, this kind of fits a gap that's not covered by your homeowners. You know, generally speaking, most people's water lines aren't gonna be a problem, right? Sewer lines are gonna be a bigger problem, particularly in older parts of town, and when we've seen some, when we're doing more cleaning and televising, and then we're going and we're actually televising lines of people because we were doing projects and we got to replace, and it's like, do we replace this one? We're seeing some stuff. And so Katie found this, or they contacted her, they might have seen an article in the paper, who the heck knows, but shortly after we denied the claim of a sewer backup, this was brought forward, and we didn't feel comfortable just saying, you're public, without having somebody else look at it and say, this makes sense. Because we're not selling it, we're not really benefiting from it, it's more or less just using the city, like some other cities have used it to offer coverage.
I see kind of two benefits to the city. One is we kind of, if something happens, we kind of know that it's going to be taken care of in a reasonable and prudent time. And two, then we already kind of, or maybe we have a better idea of who's going to be coming in and working on it. So there's kind of that pre-arranged agreement.
And he did say that they will work with us if there's certain contractors that we would prefer to have, you know, versus just call somebody in from another city.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're fine.
I'd like to see all the exclusions though. Are they gonna send that out?
Oh, I'm sure that there's, like I said, they don't do backups within the home, but from my understanding, they cover everything, you know, any kind of problems outside on the line itself.
Hopefully.
For exterior, water lines, leaks, breaks, corrosion, blockages, root intrusion, and other damage such as from freezing. Sewer lines. And it goes to tell about the restoration of the ground, repair of landscape and shrubbery, and paved services, etc. Any other questions?
Seeing as it's opt-in and they're kind of just asking to utilize some of the city logo in the delineation and marketing that way, as long as they're clear, I know they call here in the implementation clear of the voluntary and that it's, you know, it's not the city offering the program, I think I'll make a motion to approve this.
It's moved. Is there a second?
A second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion or question? Call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Has reviewed this, we had talked about putting in some signage, things of that nature. Ultimately, since the construction has started and we've learned a little bit more about the project, we're recommending it be changed to a one-way, which is probably the biggest change on the roadway. Blossom Street has a one-way on the western side, so you'd essentially have a one-way going up the hill, a two-way from Watson to Blackburn, and then a one-way from Blackburn to Houston. The crosswalk was the initial concern of safety on the state highway, and we have talked about kind of a slow approach to seeing what level of crossing and traffic will be there. So we were talking about adding, essentially more hatched or crosswalks, just the kind of striped crosswalks in that area. We then learned that the Boys and Girls Club parking lot and some of their area will not accommodate bus traffic very easily. They cannot make the turns with large buses to get into the facility and stack buses with existing parking on their site. They can get smaller buses and other vehicles loading and unloading there, but to put 2 or 3 buses there on their actual physical site will be very problematic, okay? So part of the reason for the design of no parking in the yellow area is to allow a larger turning radius coming off of Blackburn to potentially move into the Boys and Girls Club parking entrance, and then kind of clearing the intersection there by their entry to their property, and then adding a bus loading and unloading zone on the south side. There would be general parallel parking on both sides of the street, which there currently is that, and then accessible parking to the north abutting the church side. There is currently some accessible parking on that side as well as the south side, so there would be a little bit of a loss of accessible parking. But the reality is none of this is really accessible parking. It's more just reserved parking for disabled individuals. They're not truly like ADA accessible parking spots from a real technical perspective. They're just sort of reserved there and for loading and unloading and parking of those that may have accessibility issues to get to church. The Boys and Girls Club does have accessible parking on their project and their property, so they have that built in. There's the addition of a crosswalk mid-block, because there will be kids going back and forth. The Boys and Girls Club have requested that. The reality is Blossom is a very narrow roadway. And to have parking on both sides, have bus parking, and the flow of traffic going through there, you are not going to necessarily be able to park on both sides without causing some problems, right? If you keep it a two-way lane. And from a flow perspective, the one-way was looked at as kind of the safest option. In terms of other property owners, there are access points. As you can see on the corner, there's a large residential commercial mixed building, a large home. You can access it off of Blossom as well as Blackburn. So they can access 2 points there. The church has access to their parking lot. That also goes back out to, is it Scott, I believe? And then the rest is pretty much the Boys and Girls Club. So we're proposing this kind of as what we would require or request as staff to accommodate some of the traffic flow concerns, some of the safety concerns, and parking concerns for East Blossom.
So I think it makes sense. I guess my only question is, I guess I would actually say that the south side of Blossom could be non-parking for the entirety of that block, because I think it would allow buses to stack up on the road momentarily and not have to worry about anything. And then I'm picturing kids crossing that crosswalk in the middle with cars parked potentially like up to it, right? Whatever, a couple feet away.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it would make more sense if that full line was just yellow from the whole side.
We also wanted to keep parking on the street on both sides, because the parking lot of the Boys and Girls Club, I don't know how many stalls it offers,
There's not many.
but in terms of peak loading and unloading, we're gonna need parking there. It's just, and if we've talked a lot about temporary loading and unloading, like, 10-minute or no more than along that south side as well, so we don't have, employees parking there when there needs to be pickups and there may need.
Or a time frame.
Yeah,
That would make
so
sense.
there's flexibility.
30-minute parking or something.
It's for a period of time, right, from this time to this time. You don't wanna have, I have personal experience being there during construction, dropping off a child, and it's very hard two-way traffic. When you have two people parked and construction going on, it's gonna be kinda like that, I think, as they operate the facility with buses and other things. So, we wanted to keep as much parking as well, because there was a lot of concern about you're kind of putting the Boys and Girls Club on a small site and not having a ton of parking, and the parking requirements for the commercial district it's built in didn't require a ton of parking, and there's been a lot of discussion about that parking lot there and who can use it and how, and where staff will be parking, and they've talked to BMO, and there's a lot of parking lot around there, it's just not owned by the Boys and Girls Club. So keeping some extra parking on the road, what was just advised from.
I think to Jonathan's point, there's always one thing that I always look at, I'll go and point at it. I always bring this up, it's kind of annoying, I know to some people, but on every crosswalk, especially on a wider road, the further out you can get your pedestrians before they actually cross into where the traffic is, the better, because it makes them more visible. So I always advocate for some sort of post or curb or something, often called a bump out, so that when someone is intending to cross the street, they can actually step out maybe equal to or just past a parked car, so that then you're wanting to cross, you can see past any vehicles, if it's a box truck or anything. You're in your apron, so to speak, for the crosswalk, and you can step to it, look down the road, check both your ways. And it really, by moving your pedestrians into kind of the view of someone driving straight ahead, it helps just that acknowledgement. And I think that goes to what you're saying here. If there's cars parked here, they're kind of tied up, you get a kid that's only this tall, or say this tall, they can come out from behind the car quickly. I don't know that this is necessarily a place for that, but just that same idea applies, where if you can get the pedestrian into the view of the traffic before they're actually out of their crosswalk or out of their area, I think it can help. So
What does the state highway say about bump outs?
it's probably gonna be hard or nearly impossible, but
I think there's a distance, I'll have to look into it, I think there's a distance requirement between parking on the street and the crosswalk too. You can't park right up to the crosswalk.
And as a former snowplow person, bump outs suck.
yeah. I know.
So,
They make more
excuse
work.
me, it makes it harder to plow a
They make-
street in the winter.
They make more work, but they're,
The second time it's easier.
Because they're called takeouts, you mean, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
smash the edge of the blade. No,
I
I understand,
think- and we've talked
I
with
always-
the police department about,
No, I like your idea.
we were talking a lot about what other improvements we can make, lighted signs, everything.
Yep.
I think the feedback from the Boys and Girls Club is they don't anticipate a ton of walking traffic
Yep.
from that area,
Right.
right? There may be more actually coming from the
other
south and
side,
from
yeah.
Houston and whatnot.
Yep.
Does this have to
So-
be done now? As far as making it a one-way street now, can you kind of see how many people are gonna be involved with the Boys and Girls Club before we change all the streets and stuff like that? And besides that, the funerals that they have at the church, is that gonna affect them?
They have access to their parking lot from Houston as well as from Blossom, right? Is this something we need to do now? I would say we have to commit to this concept because the Boys and Girls Club needs some predictability of how they're gonna manage their site and manage drop-offs and pickups, particularly for buses. I would say that in absence of this, you could have bus traffic both ways, which will really
Well, you wouldn't do
Jackson,
that.
but this is,
They could.
A bus company wouldn't do that.
The
Well, now
church
town
parking
bus
lot is a
company
one-way
would
too
know.
anyway.
You can't have out-of-town people.
The flow of
going
that
to
church
Boys and
parking
Girls.
lot, you have to come in from Blossom, you have to leave Scott.
They
I
could
thought
do
it
it,
only
Not
could
two
be
Yeah, that way,
local
that way,
people.
So, I mean,
oh, they could do an intramural
that parking
basketball
lot wouldn't
game or
matter.
something.
Yeah.
Because you could never come
but
back.
the other one to the south, Houston Street, they have access off of
Yeah.
Houston, you know? There's not anybody being cut off. You know, generally speaking, we have an ordinance section that identifies all of the one-way sections in town. And most recently, St. Wenceslas was repealed to go to two-way. This would require an ordinance amendment.
Does it-
And, yeah,
Does the church line up, how do they line up funeral processions? Do they use Blossom?
well, I don't know necessarily what they use for funeral processions. I guess it depends on, probably on Blossom going this way if they're lining up along the church side, which they could still do under this but they would just be leaving via Houston instead.
I know this is tangential to the one-way, which I really don't have a problem with. I don't know if your kids are in Barlow yet. I guess like the one thing of this whole thing that I'm just dreading is like knowing how Barlow is at drop-off and pickup and understanding like, are we gonna have that same like horror here?
On Blackburn,
Yeah.
that's what we've talked about, and that's one of the reasons why we want a one-way to keep people from coming
Yeah,
both
and it'll
ways
help, I
and
just-
flow of traffic through one way. But our biggest concern is the backup
Backing
on
up all the way.
Blackburn, which is why the bus loading and unloading has to stay there, and we can't do it on the other side of the street, because then you're making the kids cross the street. The Boys and Girls Club in that bus loading and unloading area is gonna create a pathway so the kids can walk across that.
They don't have, I can't picture exactly where it is. They don't have a way to do unloading on Houston to get them even further away from Blackburn?
Not without having the kids cross the road, or them coming back on Houston on this side, if they're coming from the north to south. But then they're making the kids walk, you know, down all the way to the Boys and Girls Club, which
The entrance is on Blackburn?
the entrance is right where the bus loading and unloading is.
So the memo talks about city staff coming up with this idea. What about the Boy and Girls Club themselves?
We met with them on site and you make sure there's clearance from crosswalks so people have vision. So we'll come forward with, you know, the execution of the plan, Alan, and his staff can get that done. The biggest thing is they're opening in June, and, you know, we have a month or two to get this lined up for them.
And a traffic flow change like this, you really want to give the public time to become acclimated to it and understand, you know, any patterns that it might, not that there's a ton go down Scott or all the way down to Fond du Lac then.
We're open to other suggestions or ideas. I just don't know from a,
Yeah, you'd have lots of parking.
yeah.
I know
It is-
other communities that have used the city committees to eliminate competition.
Who would do such a thing?
But, you know, it doesn't have to go from there.
We also heard from the church?
I was just gonna ask,
Yeah.
because there's two churches there, right?
Two churches,
Yes.
actually, yeah.
Yeah, so we haven't, we've made some assumptions because the preschool's coming with the Boys and Girls Club. If this is the first time this is going public, we will reach out to them and let them know that this is being considered. But in terms of the design, the reason why it wasn't outright,
Okay,
I'm actually thinking it might be better for the churches.
I'm just,
Think about when you let the churches out.
And I'm looking at the funeral or the car, you know, for the casket, because it's always parked that way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so they're gonna have to change their parking or whatever it is.
They always park to leave going west?
The ones that I've always seen, yeah.
Okay, all right.
they could keep that, but just go down Houston, right? They could park on that side, just be on the north side. The biggest thing is we have to do something, because the idea of having a funeral and having the Boys and Girls Club at the same time, we have to have some level of control there. There has to be some control in that area there, or it's just gonna be parking and problems.
I'll make a motion to approve this to go to common council for recommendation.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded. Further discussion or question? Not call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Project updates and staff reporting.
For those that are interested, I just brought pictures to share of progress at the new DPW building. The precast the final precast panel was placed the afternoon of Tuesday, February 4th. And then we promptly got into some bad weather and some very cold weather, so progress has been slow since. If a period of good weather is achieved, the building, the roof and the roofing membrane and the insulation could be completed in about 3 weeks. So they're talking that if things go reasonably as planned, that they could be enclosed and then working on the interior concrete floors by the end of March.
Very good.
So are they right on schedule, pretty much?
Technically, they're ahead of schedule. We say that very quietly.
Are you going with the in-floor heat on that?
We did go with the option for the in-floor heat for the mechanic bay. There's actually 4 bay.
Right.
That's a 4-bay garage, and 3 of them dedicated to mechanics, and the other bay dedicated towards just random projects that, especially during the winter months, that DPW crews would work on. So.
Very good. Any other updates or staff reports? If not, then suggestions for agenda items for the next meeting. And if not, do we announce the next meeting date, or we don't know?
We can schedule as needed. I think Alan has a few things.
I'm working on the access control, at least as far as 1 and 2 family residences, to accommodate wider driveways, given garages, things like that. So I'm working on that. I think there's one other thing, I can't remember what it is that I'm working on for you, but
We wanted to get these in front of you because we were working on them and keep it under a meeting, an hour, because Jeff doesn't like.
Steve told me that. I was
I can't
prepared.
believe we can drag this out for like 20
I know.
minutes.
There's actually a modification I just saw that we should probably make because our time was set for
Yeah.
5:300.
Yeah, well,
Right.
Yes. So we'll have to wait a little while until then. It's
All right.
a couple
Okay.
more hours.
Okay, then I guess we're at the tail end here. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Moved. Seconded. Cast a unanimous ballot.